The dense fog curled through the ancient pines like ghostly fingers, muffling the sounds of the forest. Shadows danced in the flickering light of a dying campfire. 4 friends sat around it, their laughter slowly giving way to an uneasy silence. Somewhere deep in the woods, a faint rustling echoed. It was too deliberate to be the wind. "Did you hear that?" asked Ethan, his eyes narrowing toward the sound. "Probably a raccoon," Sarah replied, poking the fire with a stick. "Relax, man." But Ethan didn't relax. Something about the sound had felt wrong. The plan had been simple, a 3-day camping trip to disconnect from the chaos of city life. Ethan, Sarah, Jake, and Lisa had hiked deep into Ravenwood Forest, a place infamous for its isolation. No cell service, no help, just nature. It was supposed to be a break from everything, but on the second night, things started to change. Jake was the first to notice something strange. "Guys, have you seen my flashlight?" he asked, rummaging through his backpack. They all shrugged it off as forgetfulness, but later that night, Ethan noticed his pocket knife was missing too. On the 3rd day, the air was unusually still. No chirping birds, no rustling leaves. It was as if the forest had been silenced. Jake was the first to go missing. "I'm going to collect firewood," he announced, grabbing a small hatchet. An hour passed, then 2. "Should he be taking this long?" Lisa asked, looking in the direction Jake had gone. They decided to search for him, calling out his name. "Jake! Jake!" They found the hatchet first. It was embedded in a tree, the handle slick with moisture. But Jake was nowhere in sight. That night, none of them slept. Every snapping twig outside the tent made them flinch. Sometime after midnight, they heard it. Rustle, rustle, rustle. "Jake!" Sarah called out, her voice trembling. "Help me." It was Jake's voice, muffled, weak. It was coming from the trees. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "We have to help him." Ethan grabbed her wrist. "Don't. It's him." Lisa tugged her arm free and bolted into the woods. "Lisa, stop!" Ethan chased after her, the flashlight beam cutting through the fog like a knife. He ran faster, branches whipping against his arms and face. His foot caught on a root, and he fell hard. As he reached for his flashlight, something else reached for it too. A hand. Pale, skeletal. Ethan's heart stopped. He heard Lisa scream ahead. "Help! Help me!" Her scream was cut short. "Lisa!" Ethan roared, his voice cracking with desperation. That's when he heard it. Footsteps behind him. Slow, steady, closer. "Ethan!" whispered a voice right next to his ear. He burst into a clearing and spotted the faint glow of the campfire. Jake was sitting by the fire, his head tilted, his eyes locked on Ethan. "You found me," Jake whispered, his voice guttural and broken. "Help me." It was Lisa's voice this time. "You found me," she whispered, stepping closer. The fog hung heavier than before, a suffocating blanket that muffled every sound. The fire crackled weakly, its light barely pushing back the darkness. Ethan sat alone, gripping his knife with trembling hands. His breath was shallow, his mind racing. Lisa's gone. Sarah's gone. Jake's not Jake anymore. He tried to convince himself it was all in his head. Sleep deprivation, fear-induced hallucinations. But the voice still echoed in his mind. "You found me?" Ethan's eyes darted toward the trees, half expecting to see Lisa's face staring back at him. His pulse quickened as a twig snapped nearby. He held his breath, every muscle in his body tensed. Time felt meaningless. The fog blurred the world into a colorless haze. Ethan's eyes fought to stay open, but exhaustion clawed at him. He blinked once, twice. "Russell!" His eyes snapped open. This time, it wasn't just a twig breaking. It was footsteps. "Who's there?" Ethan's voice was hoarse, barely louder than a whisper. Silence. He stood slowly, knife raised. His breath formed clouds in the cold air. The footsteps started again, faster this time. They circled him, each step crunching in a different direction. Ethan spun around, his heart slamming against his ribs. "Show yourself," he yelled, voice cracking. Laughter, faint, childlike. Ethan couldn't stay at the campsite. He knew that now. He had to move, had to find Lisa and Sarah, or at least what was left of them. He packed his bag with shaky hands, throwing in water, snacks, and his flashlight. As he zipped the bag, something moved just beyond the edge of the firelight. His breath hitched. "No, no, no," he muttered, backing away. The figure didn't move. It just watched. With a burst of adrenaline, Ethan bolted into the woods. His flashlight bounced wildly, beams of light slicing through the fog. Branches clawed at his arms and face as he ran. He didn't stop running until his legs burned, lungs heaving for air. He collapsed to his knees, clutching at the damp soil. "Don't stop. It's following you." Panting, Ethan glanced behind him. Nothing. Just trees and fog. But he knew better than to trust his eyes. A sound broke the silence. A low, distant hum. At first, Ethan thought it was the wind, but it had a rhythm, a pulse, like chanting. He strained his ears. It was definitely chanting. Low voices, multiple voices, humming a wordless melody. The hairs on Ethan's arms rose. "No, nope, not going that way." But as he turned, the chanting grew louder, closer. His flashlight flickered. The beam dimmed. "No, no, no, no," he muttered, smacking it against his hand. The light died. Breath directly behind him. He spun around, knife raised. No one. A whisper slithered into his ear. "You shouldn't have run, Ethan." His scream echoed through the forest. He stumbled forward, tripping over roots and rocks. His eyes darted left, right, behind him. Every shadow looked like a person. "Stay away!" he shouted, swinging his knife at nothing. Ahead he spotted a light, flickering, yellow-orange like a campfire. Another camp? Thar. He sprinted toward it, hope surging in his chest. As he got closer, the flames grew clearer, revealing a campsite eerily similar to his. But it wasn't empty. Two people sat by the fire, Jake and Lisa. Lisa! Ethan's heart leapt. She didn't move. She sat perfectly still, hands on her knees, her head tilted to one side. "Lisa?" he called again, stepping closer. "Lisa, it's me." Her head turned too quickly to face him. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice a perfect copy of his own. Jake stood, his grin as wide and unnatural as before. "You found us," Jake said, his voice distorted like two voices speaking at once. Ethan's mind was breaking. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. "You're not real," he whispered, backing away. Lisa and Jake tilted their heads in unison. "Snap, snap." "Don't leave, Ethan," Lisa said in a soft, sing-song voice. Jake's smile widened, his jaw unhinged slightly, revealing too many teeth. The fog surged around Ethan like a living thing, snuffing out the firelight. He ran. But no matter how far he ran, he kept hearing it behind him. "You found us, Ethan." The fog was alive. Ethan knew it now. It crept, swirled, and slithered with purpose. Each breath he took tasted like metal, cold and sharp. The air itself seemed heavier, pressing down on him. He didn't know how far he'd run, only that he had to keep moving. But the voices wouldn't stop. Jake's broken laughter echoed from everywhere. Lisa's distorted voice repeated his name like a lullaby. "Ethan, you found us. Ethan." He stumbled, his flashlight flickering with each step. His legs screamed for rest. but he knew what would happen if he stopped. His heart pounded so hard it hurt. He gasped for breath, leaning against a tree, his chest heaving. Sweat and mist clung to his skin, making his clothes feel heavier. No plan, no direction, just run. But no matter where he went, the trees all looked the same. He glanced back and froze. He wasn't alone. Two figures now stood in the mist, unmoving but too familiar. Jake, Lisa, their heads tilted in unison, their smiles too wide, too sharp. "You found us, Ethan," Lisa said, her voice melodic but hollow. "Stay with us," Jake added, his voice layered with two other voices beneath it, one of them eerily like Ethan's own. "No!" Ethan shouted, taking off deeper into the woods. The fog wrapped around his legs like waterlogged cloth, slowing him down. He stumbled again, scraping his knees on exposed roots. The flashlight flew from his hand and rolled into the fog. He crawled for it, fingers scraping at the dirt. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, he felt it too. A hand, clammy, cold, fingers curling around his wrist. He screamed and yanked his arm back, heart racing as he staggered to his feet. The fog ahead parted slightly, and his eyes locked on something new. A cabin. Hope surged through him. A shelter. A place to hide. Maybe a radio. He ran for it, his shoes crunching dead leaves. His eyes flicked back and forth, expecting Jake or Lisa to appear in the fog, but they didn't. The door was slightly ajar, the warm glow of a lantern spilling onto the porch. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a slam. Lock it now. He slid the metal bolt across with trembling hands, heart still racing.